Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual program from Olmsted to the Future, Stewarding the Planning and Architecture of the Stanford Campus, organized and presented by the Stanford Historical Society. I'm Leslie Kim, and I am Vice President of the Historical Society, as well as co-chair of the program committee. I want to extend a special thanks to those of you who are members of the Society for your support, which makes these webinars and our other important historical resources possible. As our members know, the Society is an independent, volunteer-driven organization devoted to the scholarship and sharing of Stanford history. And we rely heavily on membership dues and donations to keep our work going and to provide content such as what you'll be hearing today. Anyone who's interested can join the Society, which you can do on our website, historicalsociety.stanford.edu. I'll now turn things over to my fellow Historical Society volunteer, Larry Horton, who is former Senior Associate Vice President and Director of Government and Community Relations at Stanford, who will introduce our main speaker today.
Thanks, Leslie. I'm excited about today's program. Stanford's land and buildings are always important, exciting topics to people. In 1945, on the recommendation of Lewis Mumford, Stanford University President Donald Tresidder established the first university planning office. We believe it's the first at any major university. And Tresidder appointed San Francisco architect and Yosemite National Park planner Eldred Spencer as its director. All of Stanford's development since 1945 has been guided by architects and planners in Stanford's planning office. At Stanford, planning is comprehensive and takes the long view. Our speaker, David Lenox, has been our university architect for 16 years so far, and his predecessor, David Newman, who has made a major imprint on Stanford, was here for 14 years. Together, they served under 4 Stanford presidents. David Lenox became Stanford's university architect in January of 2005. After a nationwide search, David received his bachelor's degree in environmental engineering from Miami University and a master's degree in architecture from Ohio State. He is a member of the American Institute of Architects. Before coming to Stanford, David led an interdisciplinary team of 40 architects, designers, and planners who worked across all industry sectors. Here at Stanford, David is not only university architect, but also the director of planning and design. Bob Reedy, Stanford's vice president for land, buildings, and real estate, said that David was chosen because his strengths in design, his team approach to solving problems, design problems, and his interpersonal skills. Reedy concluded his announcement of David's appointment by saying, "Now and in the future, we need to embrace the benefits of compact urban development while solving the challenges that increasing density demands. We believe David is the right person to lead us to correct design solutions." I'm not going to tell you about the many buildings and facilities David has brought to fruition at Stanford. That's, after all, what he's going to talk to us about. But I do want to highlight one significant fact about David's tenure. David is the only university architect who has completed a major building for each of the 6 schools of the university. That is a rare and noteworthy accomplishment. Let me add that before I retired from Stanford, I worked for many years on the politics of land use, and I had many occasions to work with David. Bob Reedy was spot on. David was the right man in the right place for Stanford at the right time. I now turn it over to David Lenox.
Thank you very much, Larry. I enjoyed working with you as well, and I'm looking forward to giving this presentation tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Stanford campus planning has really played an instrumental role in the cultivation of a vibrant campus community. But what has been clear to me as a university architect for those 16 years is the importance of building on the foundation of the principles set forth by the founder's design team, including first and foremost, Frederick Law Olmsted. Today, I would like to take you on a virtual journey to illustrate how our planning principles build on that foundation, and they drive the physical character of our campus, but also the culture and the health of our Stanford community. Now, I am not an expert on Olmsted. I tapped into quite a range of resources that have provided wonderful insight, including The Founders and the Architects, a book co-authored by our own Paul Turner, A Gentleman's Quarrel, an article in the Stanford magazine by Daniel Arnold, and Genius of Place, a recent book by Justin Martin. In 20 years, when you escort your youngster up Palm Drive to his freshman year at Stanford, will the farm look very different to you? Well, nobody knows, says Oscar Nelson, Stanford's master planner. Not only are there no definite plans for new academic buildings for the next couple of decades, there aren't even many places left to put them. Now, this quote for me captures the sentiment that many alumni, visitors, and even former planners feel about the possibilities of a changing campus character. In this case, it was felt that the campus was going to slow down or even stop growing altogether. But this quote was from over 45 years ago, and the campus, for anybody that's been here recently, has certainly continued to evolve. And while as an architect, I'd love to think that students apply to Stanford because of the well-designed buildings or the beautifully manicured landscapes, it's really been that spirit of academic excitement that continues to be the attraction. We leverage the poignant juxtaposition of the main campus you see here in red with the remainder of the 8180 acres, which is really more rural in nature. And that juxtaposition is also echoed in the culture of our students. They're hardworking, they're serious, they're inquisitive, but they're also irreverent and jocular. Now, as we move together through the presentation, I'll weave together the principles important to Olmsted and their relative influence on the campus and the Stanford ethos. Olmsted, for example, would have enthusiastically participated today in our university discussions on equity, race, inclusion, and diversity. His thoughts on the importance of transitioning landscape from something only accessible and appreciated by the rich to an amenity that would benefit the masses directly correlates to the Stanford culture and the openness of our campus today. Our diversity is our strength, and we aspire to cultivate a campus culture that encourages inclusion and equity. So let's briefly lay the foundation for the university. It was founded in 1885 from the Stanford tragedies of losing their only son. And the aspiration to provide an education to all children of California really set the stage. Governor Stanford engaged strong, diverse team members, and they did their best to balance his aspirations with their counsel and their expertise. And Olmsted played a key role in providing, I'll call them options, for the initial planning of the campus. And consistent with Olmsted's other park and campus plans, his first recommendation was to place the campus up in the foothills with buildings informally nestled into the topography and the oak drifts. And Stanford immediately dismissed that concept. As Olmsted developed other alternatives and developed a new asymmetrical quad concept on the flat plain, he continued to lament there is not any word half big enough for his ideas of what it is to be, referring to Stanford. Olmsted's asymmetrical quad, with a church positioned off axis to the west, still allowed, though, however, an uninterrupted view to the foothills. But Stanford also dismissed that plan and insisted on the east-west orientation of the quad with the church at the end of the primary axis of Palm Drive. And I believe his pleasure in yet again redirecting the design and planning was quite evident here. Olmsted had his fundamental principles rattled a bit, and Governor Stanford got his way. Now, many of my university architect colleagues across the country understand how privileged our university was to have started with an initial comprehensive plan. Key precepts of that plan include a robust Palm Drive and oval entry to the main quad, a framework of north-south and east-west axes and malls, as seen in the red dashed line. An organization of quadrangles along an east-west axis. Buffers of the Arboretum to the north and the foothills to the south. Faculty housing that is set on the bias to juxtapose with the perpendicular orientation of the rest of the campus. And these guiding principles really, although it was a tense process, birthed this visionary plan, and we continue to build on many of these same guiding principles. They ground our campus planning, and they provide a framework for the physical campus design, including the revitalization of the Olmsted Plan, the stewardship of our historic resources. The principles also encourage a healthy community, such as infusing culture and arts into the campus, or sustaining residential student life. So let's explore first how the Olmsted Plan continues to shape our campus. The Olmsted Plan truly was a masterful framework and was brilliant in its ability to forecast long-term growth for the university. But by the mid-1900s, we had somewhat lost our way and ignored many of those precepts. And in 1991, the trustees recommitted to those principles from the original plan. And the big difference, I think, in the newer diagram is the big circle, campus drive loop. I don't think Frederick Law Olmsted was as concerned with the cars at the time that he was doing our plan back then. But to restore many of those principles, we have transformed the malls like Jane Stanford Way, which was previously a street with parking, into a beautiful, iconic transverse mall. Our planning has accommodated transitions in modes of transportation, here as seen in the example of LeSwain Mall. Now, a while ago in our office, we were looking over some of these plans and somebody noticed that Olmsted himself had used the idea of a circular node to resolve the changes in directions and the changes in axes. And ironically, in the more recent years, we had been focused on improving large asphalt intersections with roundabouts in many of these same locations as the original plan. And they have helped us to improve the safety of vehicular traffic, bikes, pedestrians, but at the same time have created visible markers and improved aesthetics along the campus drive loop. But the main quad has certainly anchored both the original Olmsted master plan and subsequent development on campus. And its bold presence is powerful, it's iconic, and it serves as the architectural heart of the campus. But the main quad and the oval also serve as a cultural heart of the university for ceremony, celebration, intellectual exchange, and even, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, opportunities for free speech as seen in the temporary memorial in the upper right-hand image. And while the mission Romanesque style of the main quad has served as a foundation for subsequent building architecture, the university has intentionally designed buildings that reflect their times. From the image of the main quad in the top left-hand corner to the Denning House in the bottom right-hand corner, architectural style has changed over time, but maintaining high quality of design, committing to a consistent earth tone palette for exterior materials, leveraging strong connections to the landscape, and carefully managing campus scale has preserved a memorable campus character. And Olmsted was a genius at crafting landscapes to create an overall composition and character of place. His notion of creating a coherent effect is fundamental in our current aspiration to maintain that memorable sense of place and character on our Stanford campus. Our landscapes continue to be the connective tissue that binds the campus together and further supports a memorable campus character. Our intent is to balance the types of intentionally programmed spaces appropriate for a campus like ours: passive spaces, active spaces, iconic spaces, and academic spaces all support memorable placemaking. So let's start by exploring our success to support the notion of the axial quadrangles of the Olmsted plan. On the east side of campus, we have the Gerhardt-Casper quad. We have plans in our long-range vision to have a future quadrangle, which would be anchored by Encina Commons and Toyon Hall and a future renovation of Carruthers Memorial. But it's really been the SEQ, the Science and Engineering Quad, that's been the most significant catalyst for moving forward the second century plan. The site for the SEQ in 1999 supported sprawling 1- and 2-story post-war buildings of around 149,000 square feet. Now, some of Stanford's most significant research and discovery was done in these buildings, which weren't that significant in their architecture. But this area still lacked a heart, and Olmsted also understood the correlation between compact density and collaboration. In 2017, the SEQ was completed. And while we were able to accommodate almost 4 times the amount of square footage in cutting-edge research and administration office and teaching space, the true star of the SEQ is the central space. The architecture with hipped clay tile roofs, quality materials, wood ceilinged arcades, and pleasing facade composition help to define that space and reflect the attributes of the main quad. We continue to breathe life into the variety of exterior SEQ spaces. And while the quad is certainly a great place to walk or ride your bike, it also offers gathering areas on upper level terraces, active social spaces supported by cafe and food trucks, and larger open areas for events and gatherings. Now, another placemaking layer we have recently added to the SEQ is a commissioned art piece, Pars Pro Toto by Alicia Quada. This piece is a set of 12 varying size stone spheres sourced from all over the world. They had interest and they changed the perspective and the scale of the quad. And what's great about art is that you can use it and you can interpret it in different ways. Pars Pro Toto, for example, provides a teaching opportunity for the geology department, but it has also been the setting for scavenger hunts for visitors and children visiting on the weekends. At a totally different level, the spheres can represent the diversity of our university population. Most of the significant challenges of the world are solved by bringing together multiple disciplines, and Stanford's campus supports and encourages these linkages, and in part through its physical planning. Now, Olmsted, of course, understood the value of creating this mixing bowl he termed communicativeness. The initial program organization of the main quad conveys that importance of intermixing faculty and students of various disciplines. Now, connections from the SEQ to medicine, to the basic sciences, to computer sciences, to earth sciences, humanities they're critical to facilitating the efforts to solve the world's biggest challenges. So let's take the School of Medicine. In 2008, the School of Medicine lacked a strong central hub and a clear identity and had very few memorable spaces. As you can see, it almost had one of every kind of architecture, and its front door was really a parking lot and service drives, as you can see in the lower left-hand image. To be more explicit, the front door of the School of Medicine in 2008 was really a hollow metal brown door that was usually locked. This was the first experience a prospective faculty member or recruit would have when they wanted to visit the dean. I actually remember my first visit with the dean. I had to knock on the door and someone had to let me in. The next year, the Li Ka-shing Center, it presented a new front door. This building serves as a hub and has transformed the culture of the school and helped to recruit and retain the best students, faculty, and administrative talent. Concurrently, the Loke Stem Cell Building was designed and constructed with the same set of architectural, I call it a kit of parts, And that's helped also to strengthen the continuity of the school and its identity. But it was really the investment in the landscape, the connective elements, and the service components that solidified the placemaking effort, very similar to the SEQ. In 2008, this was the front of the School of Medicine, a parking lot, a service drive. You can see in the upper left-hand image the portal of the Clark Center. A year later, the Discovery Walk is an energetic mall that knits together the multiple School of Medicine facilities and provides opportunities for impromptu meetings, areas for respite, wellness classes, and even performances. An installation of granite benches with etched graphic storytelling highlight the milestones in the school's history. The School of Medicine also programmatically connects the university with the medical center, the new Stanford Hospital and the new Children's Hospital, the recently dedicated Biomedical Innovations Building, as well as a Center for Academic Medicine on Quarry Road, programmatically link research to the medical center, but also architecturally meld the School of Medicine architecture with the Stanford Hospital architecture. The Center of Academic Medicine provides a direct and physical connection to the Arboretum, and that really drove its concept and its program for exterior placemaking. It's a beautiful view to the area around the mausoleum and the cactus garden. And a new complex for ChemH in neurosciences also works hard to strengthen connections. It's been designed as both a hub and a magnet to encourage multidisciplinary research and discovery. But it also is designed to serve as a gateway to what will be someday a future quad to the west or to the left of the science and engineering quad. The elliptical shaped courtyard, the organic shaped convening and social pavilion both encourage social interaction as well as invite large events and gathering. And it's a contemporary interpretation of many of the same attributes you see in the SEQ and the main quad. If we fly back up in the air, this is an aerial from a little over 10 years ago. And you can see the recently completed Discovery Walk on the left in the School of Medicine in the red dashed line, which leads through the two portals of the Clark Center. But when it got over to the basic sciences and computer science area, it sort of lacked a place to go. Our vision is to create a connection, to create a commons, a smaller quadrangle that can help to collect and provide opportunities for even more density, but with a beautiful space at the center. And that Discovery Walk extension now has a way to importantly connect the School of Medicine to basic sciences and computer sciences. We're lucky in that two of the anchor buildings, the Bass Biology Building and the SAP Center, have been completed, as well as the Annette's Cafe, which helps to anchor the space as well. The SAP Center is a rehabilitation of the original old chem building, which we have presented before in this group, but not only focused on creating cutting edge teaching and labs for biology and chemistry, it also included exterior convening spaces and social areas that help to support the faculty and the students in this area campus. You can see the long wooden benches, somewhat derived from train station benches, to the curvy lounge chairs on the right-hand side and tables with umbrellas. And these all work to invite community and interaction. And the SAP Center, one of the original photos, is an especially great example of how we can integrate cutting-edge teaching and infrastructure into some of our historic resources. The Bass Biology Building on the other side of the Commons welcomes the extension of the Discovery Walk coming from the portal of the Clark Center. Its colorful electronic media mesh reinforces that portal, that connection of Discovery Walk through to the Commons, but it also represents imagery from biology research. Now, as you move through that portal into the trellis-covered no-lop courtyard, you can start to see how we do our work. We start with spaces like this with program. What will make it a wonderful place? And in this case, areas for coffee carts and poster sessions and social events, or places just to sit around a hearth in the garden, all strengthen that connection and sense of place and encourage community. What's interesting to note is the color palette of the members of the trellis you see in the bottom right-hand corner are derived directly from the Stanford blend of clay tile in many of our roofs. A new project, the Bridge Complex for the Digital Future, will anchor the southeast corner of this new commons on what some of you will remember is the former site of Heron Labs in Heron Hall. It has two components. The building architecture on the corner of Jane Stanford Way and Lomita Mall will be a little bit more reflective of the rectilinear DNA of many of our historic buildings, have the clay tile roof, while the organic shaped building, the component set back from Jane Stanford Way to make way for this beautiful below grade garden court, really signals a look to the future in data science. Now, Olmsted often reflected that he was creating landscapes as if they were beautiful painting. Infusing culture and art into the campus fabric adds that extra brushstroke for us to create a memorable sense of place. The Bain Concert Hall invites both the Stanford community and local communities to share performances and be exposed to new and memorable experiences. And although the iconic architectural design is distinctive, the real splendor is to melt in the glorious acoustics and the beautiful interiors. The Anderson Collection houses a world-class assemblage of contemporary art and offers up an equally rewarding experience for both the Stanford and local communities. Designed specifically to house contemporary art, the Anderson Collection building, it's a great example of how we think about architectural compatibility on our campus. In this case, the compatibility of a contemporary building with the original Stanford Museum. The Anderson is cited to define the edge of the courtyard. The scale harmonizes with the original museum, and the exterior cladding, its pattern, its materials, its color, complement the existing architecture. The contemporary design reflects the period in which it was built as well, which is very important to us. Now, the McMurtry building on the other side of the Cantor, for this building's for art and art history, complements the architecture of the Cantor Center in different ways than the Anderson. The sculptural expression is clad in buffed colored stucco to match the Cantor Center addition, and the pre-patinaed zinc shingles hearken to our Stanford clay tile roofs. The McMurtry, like many of our research buildings, encourages users from other parts of campus. While this building focuses on supporting the visual arts and art history, it also serves as a popular place for integrated dance, music, and drama performances. So unlike the main quad and even the science and engineering quad, where multiple buildings create a collection and an assemblage that creates a whole, the venues for the arts tend to be a little bit more individualized. The buildings are a little bit more object-like, but they're still architecturally part of the Stanford family. With the renovation of Frost Amphitheater, Stanford Live has emerged with an energetic and varied program of performances and gatherings. And we are very careful in our planning to retain the pastoral essence of the venue while upgrading the ability to provide world-class performances. Now, while not adjacent to the other art buildings at the entrance to the campus, the Wendover Contemplative Center is equally inspiring. As a place for students, faculty, and staff to perhaps decompress before a test, to meditate, or simply get some alone time away from a roommate, Wendover has certainly supported Jane Stanford's original intent. Carefully situated adjacent to the Papua New Guinea Sculpture Garden, but also convenient to the campus center, Wendover is a design that reflects its time in which it was constructed as well. It's designed around a collection of window-over paintings by Nathan Oliveira. The direct connection to views in the landscape, as well as the visual and tactile qualities of the rammed earth walls. These walls are actually constructed using the dirt from the excavation on the site. They provide a quiet and energizing place to experience the Stanford community in a different way. Now, most students, faculty, staff, visitors, alumni understand the power of a campus that is characterized by memorable spaces. The crafting of these spaces is truly intentional, and a healthy, vibrant campus needs a variety of spaces to accommodate its community. While social and active spaces are truly important, our polling of students and their favorite places on campus indicates the importance of places that simply provide respite and quiet. Exterior spaces to provide academic support. Our beautiful climate also benefit from the infusion of art and landscape. So sometimes it's the small but meaningful moves, like the recent restoration and placement of the griffins to flank the entry to Mausoleum and the Angel of Grief. But it can also be the complete transformation you see here in 2008 of the site of 2 office buildings that were surrounded then by 900 asphalt parking spaces into the Graduate School of Business Night Management Center. And I remember the process well. We spent as much time at the beginning trying to program the exterior spaces before we even went into the interior spaces. And the dean really wanted to make sure there was an active central heart where faculty and students couldn't help but bump into each other, stop and mix and engage. And if you stop by the Night Management Center at any given day, there now is a buzz of activity that makes you feel like you're kind of part of the crowd. Coffee carts, cafe tables and chairs, there's Adirondack rockers, beer stube tables, and a robust art program. And these do as much to energize the space as the people there. The Stanford Law School also focused on how to use exterior space to enhance interactions between law student teams and their faculty. The architecture speaks to hope and potential, and the contemporary motif and attributes of the Newcomb building are a fresh interpretation of the main quad and other buildings. The law school also provides a variety of exterior spaces. There's a more civic entry plaza with a Calder sculpture. There's an active social hub in the Crocker Garden in the lower right-hand corner image. And there's also a beautiful second level courtyard, which now to many on campus is a favorite Stanford place to meet or simply just work alone. The Denning House, which is in my background, I'm sitting on the deck, virtually at least, is home to the community of Knight Hennessy scholars. And it anchors the south end of Lomita Mall and Lomita Street. And what that does is encourage really easy connections to earth science, to the science and engineering quad, to the main quad, to the basic science and computer sciences, onwards to the art, onwards to the Arboretum, and even into Palo Alto. It's really a great location. And it's got a prominent glass and wood facade, a deck that fronts Lagunitas and the walking path in the foothills. And it really enables those scholars to convene, socialize, and connect to others at the university. But the Denning House is also a great example of how capital projects can integrate an art program. This next sequence of photos captures the installation of Moxna by Ursula van Rydensvaart. And the filigree at the very top of this sculpture, this is a bronze sculpture, is especially beautiful in the evening as you approach the front door for an event. Now, some of you may remember Meyer Library, and we studied and explored ways to keep Meyer Library, but the seismic challenges were too hard to overcome. We would have literally had to take the whole roof and all the columns off because of the instability at the time. And what we thought when we were molding a sort of a temporary landscape after we took down that building has turned from Meyer Library to Meyer Green. And this has become a magnet for undergraduate students. It easily flexes from a quiet place to sit under the oak in an Adirondack chair to a venue for performances, or even a major event like NSO. Now, we did save the original Meyer Library stair and landing, and this plinth will now host a new temporary art installation every year or two. The intention is to create, first of all, an academic opportunity to work with artists, hopefully set new traditions. Maybe it gets unveiled every 2 years at reunion weekend, and also complement the existing art collection that you see already around Meyer Green and Canfield Court. Now, in this area, the Graduate School of Education is in the process of creating a new hub for its school. The existing School of Education building, many of you may have called it Cubberley in the past, will be transformed through a major renovation, and a new south building will complete that complex. We're creating a courtyard that will join those two buildings and create a heart, and also become a portal from LeSwain Mall at the main quad to Meyer Green. Now, this is the first rendering shows the south facade of the south building, which will face the town center with beautiful exterior patios that will provide opportunities for connections. And while most of the perimeter of the original School of Education building, which is a historic resource, it will be maintained, a key feature of the renovation will be a 3-story forum. This distinctive glass facade, which reflects the mutton or the crisscrosses in the windows, the proportions of the original fenestration, fronts that central courtyard and enables the GSC to really open up and highlight its vision and its mission. Now, as one moves a little closer, you can start to see how the exterior spaces and the interior spaces will meld, and this is much more evident as you get closer to the front door. Now, this forum will provide direct connections to the courtyard, of course, but be able to promote casual and social interaction, accommodate a brown bag lunch lecture, or even a more formal presentation. And switching gears, Olmsted probably did not worry too much about parking in his planning, but today parking on campus is critical and is managed as an overall system. We've been constructing centralized parking below grade as much as we possibly can and where we can. For our recent below grade structures, we've also programmed the above ground areas for community activity, kind of get 2 for 1 on the site. So recreation, picnicking, performance, or just casual gathering creates these unique hubs in especially these student residential regions. And these are just some images from the areas completed above the Robley parking garage at Robley Field, the Wilbur parking garage, Wilbur Field, and of course the recently completed Manzanita parking garage with a Manzanita field above. And we feel like this is a good recipe for being able to accommodate both the car, but also provide recreation and beautiful outside space. Now, one of our most exciting long-range initiatives is the revitalization of Campus Center. The new town center will leverage its location to provide an appropriate density to encourage vibrant community. But we really want to make sure it also connects to the more park-like spaces of Meyer Green, the lush green landscape that stretches to Lagunitas, to Windover, to the Denning House, and become a very sort of holistic, vibrant place, almost more of a park with a very vibrant center. We've documented over 800 conversations, which are now informing the program and the ethos of the new town center. And in short, the town center will balance intellectual vitality, culture, social engagement, and meeting our daily needs of our campus population. Students, faculty, and staff need a healthy and inclusive community now more than ever, coming out of the pandemic, of course. The town center will revitalize the core of our campus to, most importantly, transform the student experience there. Now, we're carefully pacing that effort, but in the meantime, are experimenting with existing campus center program and spaces to see what resonates with our students and community. These efforts, grounded by student input, include a new multi-use exterior pavilion, new ways to think about seating and gathering, and enhanced social programming of existing spaces. I'll shift gears even more. While Olmsted certainly had no inkling that the university would create satellite campuses, our new Stanford Redwood City campus builds on so many of the same principles in the ethos of our main campus. As with the Olmsted plan, a framework establishes a clear path for future growth, with phases organized around a prominent, lush greenway and secondary connections open to the neighborhood. The quality of the architecture and the exterior materials, the use of connecting arcades, the connective tissue of the landscape, and the inviting and inclusive nature of campus to the local community are attributes directly derived from the original precepts in Olmsted's plans. Amenities include dining pavilion, health and wellness, recreation center, and just creating a strong sense of place and belonging. Now, from the birth of the university, Stanford's always aspired to be a residential campus. Olmsted understood the vital importance of supporting a residential campus for students and the faculty. And this image of Encina Hall, the first dormitory for men on campus, was complemented by faculty housing on other parts of campus as well. Sustaining residential life, however, for us today is more than just building new dorms. Recently, we've added outside exercise areas. We've worked with students from Robley Hall, for example, to construct sustainable garden plots, as well as transform what was a somewhat dilapidated service and parking lot behind Robley Hall into a wonderful outside communal space. We're continuing to explore with residential and dining enterprise other ways to support the residential community. Now, the new ResX initiative encourages these ideas. The new neighborhood model you see here provides opportunities for greater connection, stronger relationships, and intentional student programming. This is a diagram of the model neighborhood that illustrates a variety of housing choices and opportunities that will exist. The idea that a student would be assigned to a neighborhood, and instead of having to be moving from all over campus every different quarter, they'd be allowed to stay in this neighborhood and create long-term connections, network of friends, and really be able to go back and remember the importance of being in a neighborhood. The campus will then take each of those individual neighborhoods and balance them between the West Campus, the East Campus, and the Central Campus, provide the appropriate amount of recreation in each of those regions, and all feed into the town center. So while we thought that would take a long time to come to fruition, the pandemic gave us a wonderful opportunity in September of this year to really start and initiate and ignite the ResX. Especially as students are sort of clamoring for community and a sense of belonging, this has been really important. And we will be able to learn and leverage the best practices from what's happening right now in preparation as we look to future renovations of other neighborhoods and new neighborhood facilities. But we have been fortunate to be able to have built some new residential halls in the last decade. We hadn't built a lot of student housing before that. The Eng House was completed, and it was really the last missing tooth of that long-range plan for the Gerhardt-Casper Quad, formerly the Manzanita Quad. Meyer and Norcliffe Halls were designed to stand alone, but also to complement the beautiful architecture and enhance the Lagunita residential complex. We also have living learning residences like the Munger Graduate Residences, which is adjacent to the law school, and the Schwab and Jack McDonald Hall, which are across from the Graduate School of Business. Jack McDonald Hall was completed in 2016, and I think it's a really wonderful example of how architecture could both fit nicely into the Stanford family of buildings, but it can have some jazz. It can incorporate commissioned art, bold color to really enliven the communal spaces. Escondido Village Graduate Residences opened 2,400 new student beds last year. And boy, that was a perfect timing. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic, trying to bring students back. This milestone project at the end of Jane Stanford Way was really envisioned to be a gateway that connected the entire graduate residential community to the rest of campus. And all aspects of community were incorporated in this project: connection to transit, pedestrian and bike-friendly circulation, recreation, community, and event spaces, and areas for social interaction. So here we are looking at the previous condition. We're standing at the end of Jane Stanford Way and Campus Drive before there was a roundabout there, which there is now. And if you look at this, it almost felt like you're leaving campus, you're on the edge of campus. Today, that same view highlights the new residential halls, a pavilion, an arcade, and a tower beacon that welcomes you home at night. And this new gateway really connects our community in such a different and a positive way to the rest of campus. In addition to the revitalization of the Olmsted Plan and principles, the key role that our planning department supports is the stewardship of historic resources. And while one doesn't always see physical changes to the main quad, the maintenance of the character-defining elements, such as the sandstone, mosaic, stained glass windows, arcade pavers, urns, roof tiles is formidable. We continue to renew, repair, and freshen up key character-defining elements. One example, a recent example, is a very carefully done mock-up of the wood ceilings of the arcades, which will celebrate the warmth and beauty of the wood, which has over time dulled, been stained, been treated differently. As we restore all of these, it'll just bring a glow back to the original main quad. We also modify historic resources and design and construct new facilities in the vicinity of historic resources. Our renovation of Robley Gym into a center for dance and drama really breathed new life into that complex. We've constructed, as we talked earlier, additions and buildings adjacent to the original museum, which is now the Cantor Center. And as we noted before, these new facilities are designed to reflect both the programs housed within as well as the era in which they were constructed. A rehabilitation of Peterson Labs for the D School celebrates the history of the original with a juxtaposition of the contemporary program and a new central forum. This transformation from a dilapidated, worn-out building into an inviting, fresh, and stimulating facility supports the underlying objectives of both the D School, but also the university. Kingscote Gardens, including the romantic landscape, has also been faithfully renewed and supports an important role now for student services. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the brilliance of the Olmsted Plan was really a clear diagram for expanding the university in a clear and responsible way. And one of our most meaningful charges today is continue to provide that clear and sustainable roadmap for the future. Now, here's just a quick reference and aerial of campus. You can see Palm Drive, white dashed line to the main quad, and Campus Drive in the red dotted line. Our long-range framework anticipates that most of the development will likely be to the west of the main quad. All those little blue boxes don't necessarily have program associated with them, but we understand the importance of having that framework. The planning precepts of the Olmsted Plan include that clear network of north-south and east-west axes of mall, you see in yellow here, as well as the extension of the primary quadrangle system along that major east-west axis, which has really grounded our vision for continued expansion. Now, sustainability is a core value of the university in our culture, in our teaching, in our research, in our operations. It's a key cultural value that enables us to grow responsibly and to make an impact on our students, communities, and the world. In our recent announcement establishing the first new school at Stanford in 70 years grounds that commitment. It'll be centrally located, which will help maximize the opportunities to celebrate and collaborate with all the various schools and operational units. But if we just take a glance at the west side of campus, which is the left side of the slide right now, we already have a wonderful collection of sustainable working facilities. The Automotive Innovation Facility, the Conservation Facility, the Central Energy Facility, and the O'Donoghue Family Stanford Educational Farm are all easily accessed today, but even more easily accessed as we extend Panama Mall eventually to that location on the west side of campus. The Automotive Innovation Facility not only provides a cutting-edge hub for exploring alternative modes of transportation, it also energizes and invites gatherings and communities and events. Now, while the original intent of the educational farm was to teach sustainable food production, that farm has served a greater purpose. It hosts critical conversations, poetry readings, yoga and meditation classes, pizza parties using the fresh produce, and yes, pulling weeds is now even a registered wellness activity. So it's really become, again, a cultural magnet for the students and faculty and staff. But perhaps it's the transformation of our energy system that's established such a high bar for other universities and municipalities and sets us up firmly for a sustainable future. With the improvements to the overall system, the improvements include the ability to purchase power with direct access, which means we can dial up the sustainable power we get. We installed 22 miles of new hot water infrastructure to replace steam. We converted over 155 buildings from steam to hot water, developed, designed, and built a new central energy facility, as well as 2 quite significant solar farms in the desert. In doing all this, by 2022, we'll have reduced our greenhouse gases by 72% from our 2011 peak and reduced our use of potable water by what was the former cogeneration plant by 18%. And by next year, we anticipate that Stanford will be able to say it's powered by 100% renewables. This graph maybe more dramatically says that story. And you can see the dramatic drop in campus greenhouse gases when we opened up the new facility back there in 2015. The system, on the other hand, also had an incredible payback. If we had replaced the cogeneration plant, we would have spent probably another $400 million over the life of that plant versus the hot water system that we developed. But the central energy facility is not just a power plant. In fact, we intentionally did not call it a plant. It's meant to be a community hub, and its architecture, which has won actually national awards, it expresses our intent to celebrate and share Stanford's accomplishment. The facility has hosted tours for groups from all over the world, held Earth Day, has served as a perfect venue for seminars that we use to educate the community all about Stanford, the many things that we do at Stanford. And I also hope you appreciate, as seen in the upper right photo, the juxtaposition of this pioneering facility with the adjacent original Stanford stables. I think it's somewhat poetic. So Stanford and Olmsted certainly had a tenuous relationship at best, but some of the most significant research and discovery today at Stanford and at other universities is derived from multiple points of view and exploration. I think Stanford and Olmsted would be proud of our efforts to steward the legacy through orderly and physical growth of the university, through its careful maintenance of buildings and grounds, our commitment to maintaining a residential university, but also just simply the achievements and the impacts Stanford has contributed on the world stage. While Olmsted was not really even invited to the dedication, he sent his congratulations, which Stanford supposedly somewhat coolly acknowledged. But you take a look at the crowd and one can only imagine the collective emotions of that particular day. And as we care for our campus, I think one of my key roles, one of our department's key roles, is to ensure that students, faculty, the university leadership, the board of trustees, and even the local communities all understand the vision, the original planning precepts, and our continued commitment to sustain the legacy. I think it's really important people understand how much passion we have for that. So thank you tonight for taking this virtual tour of campus with me. And as I noted at the beginning of the presentation, the spirit of academic excitement and community it's key to sustaining that vibrant, memorable campus. And I truly believe our planning helps support that legacy. So at this point, I really want to turn it back to Larry, and he can facilitate questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that was spectacular. I think everybody watching this show learned many new things about Stanford architecture. It was spectacular, and the photos were utterly gorgeous. We have quite a few people who have questions. And so let me just start with them. First of all, a general question. Many people have asked more about the palettes. You talk about the Stanford palette and materials. At what point did Stanford catalog palettes with descriptions and materials? When was that done, and where is that? I assume that everyone that constructs on campus now is obliged to use those palettes. Is that correct?
Actually, our design guidelines are a little looser. We don't prescribe you have to use this particular material, but the intent of the palette is harmony. Mm-hmm. And I think we have found there have been times when the palette hasn't been consistent and harmonized, and it really has. We've either corrected that or we continue to live with it, and we'll correct it at some point. But in general, they're earth tone palettes, buff colored buildings, warm woods, terracotta colors. You can see the kit parts at the School of Medicine. We use that cardinal red at the roof of the Clark Center. And part of our intent as we did a master plan was to say every one of your buildings needs to use that particular material and color to emphasize an accent, create a roof, create an entry, create something that really is important. And so we use what I like is that we use the materials in different ways. The McMurtry is probably, pre-patinaed zinc shake shingles is not something you probably would have written down in a design guideline, but it actually does complement the intent, as well as the Bass trellis, which uses the color range of the terracotta in yet a different way to meet the sky.
Well, thank you, David. Now there are 3 questions that have come in. I'll just sort of make them into one, but they all deal with Escondido Village. I will not read the one that starts this behemoth housing complex, but I'll read this one. How do the new Escondido Village graduate residential buildings reflect Olmsted or architectural standards mentioned by the speaker? Why are such buildings as these allowed to be built on campus?
So I'll answer it first of all with a programmatic answer. We need housing. It's important to have housing as a residential campus. Many of our students were living in the local communities where the local communities need housing as well. So density is very important. What's really critical in my role, as well as all of Bob Reedy's group, is we have to have the broader 50-year plan, not what are we doing in the next 5 years. And so in order to preserve the ability even to do more housing, you have to go more vertical. And we painfully analyzed how vertical is too vertical. In fact, at one point they were higher and more consistently high. And so we broke down the scale a bit. We moved and shifted the entire complex a little further away from El Camino for view sheds. But what makes it more consistent with Olmsted is the planning. If you really looked, I didn't show a site plan or talk about it as much, but if you look at it being the terminus of Jane Stanford Way, and what does it terminate in? It terminates in a series of courtyards, just like the main quad is a series of courtyards that terminates Palm Drive. And there are courts between each of the residence halls. And so I think there's a lot of the spirit of the way he thought about compact density and planning. Stylistically, we started a lot more contemporary, but we realized that some of our most beloved buildings by Bakewell and Brown, Toyon Hall, Encina Commons, the Old Union, there's a sensibility about detail and the way windows are made and columns and roofs meet the sky that was really important. And so that was the more of the direction we thought could work. That's why it breaks down to a 2-story pavilion, a tower piece, an arcade, and isn't just 4 big buildings.
Yes. Jeff in Powell, Jeff asked the question, what has been the contribution of John Arriaga to buildings, landscaping, and the funding of various buildings?
Well, John has truly been an important friend of Stanford, and many of his buildings were built from a programmatic standpoint. We needed rec centers. We needed, our facilities at the time were subpar. They, in many cases, weren't life safe. They didn't provide enough recreation. So if you just took, for example, as 2 recreation centers, which are a buzz now because students, faculty, and staff really needed that program. John also has contributed a lot to all of the Daper athletics area in terms of both the facilities and the landscape. And it becomes even more important now as we start to look at the ideas of equity and inclusion and, making sure that all the sports are actually treated equally. And so we actually are working on that now in terms of everything from locker rooms to outside spaces. So I think John's been truly a friend of the university and contributes in different ways. I can't get specific about how much he contributes because it's different on every project.
All right. Steve asks, what is the university's vision of the future of open space beyond the central campus? Any change in land use or intensity or recreation? Thanks.
Well, our jurisdiction regulates where we can build and how much we can build. And currently, most of the building we're able to do, at least in Santa Clara County, is within our main campus. There's a little boundary called the academic growth boundary, which is primarily on the campus side of Juniper Serra. We are not allowed to go up into the hills and build a lot of square footage over a certain period of time, nor would we want to. And that's one of the reasons you see more compact density with a collection of buildings like the SEQ or even at Escondido Village graduate residences. We don't want to start building buildings all up into the foothills and then find out that's just, urban sprawl. so that the compact density enables us to keep that space open. The dish obviously is an asset for the communities and used heavily for recreation. And I think that won't go away for a while, if ever, long time at least.
Dennis asked the question, the signature sandstone appearing in the main quadrangle, how well is it holding up to environmental conditions? My sense, it is a challenge to maintain.
He has a very good sense. Sandstone is sand, and so if your irrigation for 50 years is aimed at the building, it is going to deteriorate. We spend an awful lot of time analyzing, for instance, the column bases of the original church. I think about 5 years ago, we had to totally reconstruct. And we use sandstone, like sandstone that we had salvaged. But we don't use sandstone on new buildings because of that reason. We've gone to limestone, which is a much harder stone, will last quite a bit longer, but it still complements the sort of the quality and sensibility of the sandstone.
All right. Now, Paul asks, what do you like least of the present landscape and buildings?
What do I like least? Oh, that's a great question, Paul. Thank you. You know, I firmly believe that the most important thing you do is put the buildings in the right place first and foremost, and architecture supports that, and landscape supports that as well. I like the fact we have variety in our landscape. If you go to some of our more Beaux-Arts building, like Toyon Hall or others built in that era, it's a little bit more formal. But you can go right outside the courtyard and be in a Tommy Church landscape, which is a lot less formal, and it was actually designed to make it more accessible, to make it more like you're living there, curvaceous sidewalks and planting. And I think what I do like about everything is that there is still a variety within a consistency.
All right, thank you. Jeff asked the question, there are still ugly modular buildings, which were supposed to be temporary after the 1989 earthquake, between Green Library and Encina Hall. When will those modulars go away?
We're actually exploring that right now. And I think that, often I think people think that we do a temporary surge modular, it's supposed to go away, and it counts as part of our GUP. So it's square footage that's on the books. But I think over time, we are looking at strategies. Those are not the best way to use land. They're typically one story. And, you know, as we continue our march down with the quadrangles, I think we have to, we've got strategies on how to, you know, demolish those and try to build buildings that are going to be a lot more appropriate for the types of research and academics that we do now.
Anonymous asks, does David have any opinion on the recent Munger controversial dorm, a San Jose State dorm with no windows for student housing? What are the considerations today about Stanford student dormitory rooms and student comfort?
Do I have an opinion on that? Well, of course I do. I've never seen so much press for a piece of architecture at a university campus. My impression is that I understand the concept of creating a communal space that is supported by rooms. I somewhat understand the concept of not having students hide in their rooms, and so make them not so great so they come out in the communal space. But I also know in my heart how important natural light and ventilation, views to the outside of nature, biophilic design is really important for health and wellness. So I was number one amazed at how many students were actually going to be housed in that dorm. 4,500 is half of our undergraduate class. And so I can't even imagine how you create communities. We found that communities of about 100 to 125 students is really a nice number to be able to get to know people, to staff, and I don't know how you would put that many students in one building.
A question from Palo Alto. Is there talk or desire to develop the Arboretum area as an actual Arboretum?
I think over time, we have looked at how we could diversify the vegetation. I think it's going to be really important. What we don't want to do is end up with just one or two types of trees in the Arboretum. And that's more for if there, if a disease comes through, half your Arboretum could be wiped out. And we have consciously started looking, and have actually over time, at providing different types of species. Even if you move around Campus Drive, there are different zones. And you may notice if you look closely that within each zone, there may be one that's more of the African zone, or one zone that is a little bit more desert zone. But I think it's really a good idea to diversify. And one of the things we're working with the county on is trying to find a way where we don't have to always replace the same kind of tree with the same kind of tree, because that leads to this monoculture, which we're trying to avoid.
Yes. Amy asks, what is the future vision for Lake Lagunita?
So Lake Lagunita is an easement. Is an easement right now because of the tiger salamander, the endangered species, and part of our habitat conservation plan. I believe we worked, it could have been 15 years on that, with the Fish and Wildlife and Game and county, to find ways to make sure that we are being good stewards of our endangered species. Part of that is having Lake Lagunita be part of this easement. We can't really, we obviously can't build in Lake Lagunita. We have to do very little to make sure that we encourage these species that are living there. The actual lake itself leaks like a sieve, so just to actually fill it with water is not really something that you could do without a lot of civil work, which we can't do because of the endangered species. So right now we're considering it a feature that you can actually enjoy yourself walking and jogging around, but we don't have plans to make it back into a lake.
Yes, and an anonymous question: does the university employ a landscape architect?
Yes, they're in my department. I have a senior landscape architect, Kathy Blake, and she has a staff of 4 people, and they focus on different things. I have a dedicated staff member, Drew, who really focuses on this issue of trees. We try to relocate and save as many trees possible, even if they're in the way or were planted in a wrong location. And that becomes an incredible part of the stewardship.
Terrell asks, are there any long-range plans for the location of the former School of Engineering building? I think it's a Terman building, which the last time I looked is just a landscaped depression.
So the Terman building, very similar to the Meyer Library building, had severe structural issues. Wasn't that old of a building. And when we had to evaluate whether or not we were going to demolish it and fill in the hole, or demolish it and fence in the hole, or demolish it and make it a space where students could go, we did the latter, almost the Meyer Green story. Students use that space. I think at this point, there are ways to enhance it programmatically, but we do not have plans to put a building there in the near future.
Another question here. The famous landscape architect, Bill Johnson, called the main part of campus as the river of oaks flowing from the foothills. Do you still see that vision today?
Yes, and we call them drifts of oaks. Bill Johnson, brilliant guy. We worked with him a lot. He's really good at big picture thinking. He can distill all these various thoughts in all these people's minds into a beautiful sketch. The character of campus is built mainly on these drifts of oaks. And if you look at even the SEQ, we didn't put trees formally in rows or in alleys like you might see in other formal spaces. It's really the informality and the juxtaposition of these oak wood drifts with the rectilinear organization of these buildings that gives you the joy. And if you go to Windover, or if you go to Robley Gym, or if you go even to that Terman site we just talked about, it's very clear there's a natural drift that comes through campus. We try our best to preserve as much of it as possible.
A question here says, is the university architect involved in the selection and citing of public art works programs on the campus? I assume this is a campus-wide sculpture program.
Yeah, we're totally involved in that. We aren't the sole decider of it. We have an incredible art steering committee now of trustees and board members and people that are really interested in this. And we've come up with sort of new principles of how you select art, how art is commissioned, where you need art, how do you work it into architecture of buildings, not just buy a piece of sculpture and plop it down, and all the above. So I think we're instrumental in making sure that we promote it as a cultural thing, and use all of our resources to make sure that we are doing the right kind of art for the right spaces.
David, I see our audience is very lively. More questions. Now, here there are two questions about architect selection. The first question is, how are architects selected for Stanford's buildings? How many people are involved, and who makes the final decision?
So typically, if it's a significant commission, we will do research. And let's say we are doing a new building on sustainability. We will do our research. There are certainly so many talented firms everywhere across our region, across the country, in the world, but there's some that may have a better insight as to how to do the building that's going to look forward the most. We'll long list, typically get about 12 architectural firms, ask them for a letter of intent, and they send in simple quals. We don't ask them to do a lot of work. And then typically we will shortlist to about 4 firms. We will invite them to a site visit. We will give them a presentation. We will invite them to a 2-step process. Typically, the first is a workshop where they show us how they work. A big part today is chemistry. You have to work with this team for 5 years, and you want to make sure you get along with the team and that they provide energy to the project. So we'll go through those 2 workshops. We get to see how they listen, how they think, how they approach a project, and then typically select a firm. And every project selection committee is a little different. I'm on probably all of them. The project manager that's leading the project will be on that, but also a user representative or 2 or 3 faculty, and sometimes you even had a trustee or donors involved as well. But typically we like to keep it more consistent. We don't do competitions per se, because we don't necessarily want to end up with 4 models on the table and you pick one. We really rather work with them and work through the issues. We'd rather pick them on their approach, their energy, and their chemistry.
Oh, thanks. Now, the second question on architects said, what are the advantages and disadvantages of working with star architects, the big names? Costs, ego, requirements, designs versus university needs and aesthetics. Can you name some of the star architects with whom Stanford has worked, has enjoyed working, and and those for whom it was not as much fun, and describe the personal dynamics in such arrangements?
Whoa. So I probably would even start that conversation with what is considered a star architect. I believe the architects we've been working with are all so ultra talented and they're the best of the best. We tend to partner, and if we have success with one or two architects, we will ask them back again for at least a short list. So for instance, ENIAD, New York City, formerly Polshek, originally did the addition to the Cantor Center. That worked out really well, and through interview processes have worked on our band concert hall, the Anderson Collection, the Denning House, the law school, and none of those buildings look alike. And I look for that. I don't want particularly a style that gets replicated around campus. I think it's nice to have more of a collection that fit into the family, but they aren't all the same. They're not all sisters. But we also have firms that have consistently worked in the School of Medicine. Yes, we have had some firms that are probably a little bit more, people would call them star architects, but I tend to look for the A+ architects, and I don't want to call them stars or not stars. We have such a rigorous process now for budget and schedule, as much as we can control it. And even with some of the architects that have maybe been more notable, we still have to hit the same budget.
Okay. Charlotte asks, is there any aspect of the original Olmsted plan that is not working?
Well, I think parts of it, the quadrangle, what I love about the Olmsted plan, first of all, is people can explain it pretty clearly. And I've had presidents explain it to me. I've had trustees explain it to me. That's the sign of a good plan. Most people tend to go straight to the idea of the quadrangles, the rectilinear east-west orientation. What probably is disintegrated a bit are all those sort of faculty housing systems on the bias. Some of that just hasn't come to fruition. But in general, most master plans tend to, need to have flexibility. We don't call ours a master plan today. We call it a framework plan. It's a framework to make decisions. If you really looked at the intent of the master plan that Olmsted did, he called it a master plan. Green Library is in the absolute wrong place. It's right, it terminates the axis that should have gone all the way through. Yet we're not taking down Green Library. So you work around it and you try to adapt to it. We can still, on the other side of Green Library, as I said, do another significant quadrangle at Encina Hall and Toyon. And I think you have to be a little bit of flexible. You have to have a little bit of flexibility.
All right. David, can you comment on the Native American heritage of the campus and how that aspect is being incorporated in the planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it always has been. And I am not the expert on all of that. We have worked hard with that group. Dr. Laura Jones in Land Buildings and Real Estate has a wonderful relationship and understands what's important to them and as a group, and how we share that culture with the rest of the university in our planning and activities. I can't point directly to, at the top of my head, to here's why we did it this way, but I know that the fact that they were here before our university is always taken into account when we're looking at sites, when we're evaluating important resources. And I do think it's a really important thing to have top of mind. I think we're doing a much better job of it now than we might have done 50 or 60 years ago.
David, the state now considers that any building 50 years old may be a historically important building. Are you worried about restrictions that might make it difficult for Stanford to renew its plant and have to make decisions we would not otherwise make?
Yeah, I have. It's very curious. I have on my staff such a wide range of people from all over the world, and one of our members is from Spain, and she laughs at the fact that 50 years old is an old building because she's, they look at 500 years old. I do worry about it. The challenge of hiring really good architects now is I don't know in 50 years if all of their work will be unable to be altered or torn down, or the renovations will be that much harder. It is a challenge even now when we look at buildings that are 50 years old that are not working. They weren't designed properly. The Terman building, is beautifully designed as it was structurally not working. And if that had been determined at its 50-year anniversary that it's a significant building, it puts you in a really awkward place as a campus. Programs change, and I think we always look for what's important. The other thing, Larry, is that it's not just the architecture, it's the things that happen in buildings that sometimes make them important resources. And everything important happens in almost every Stanford building. So it really puts the pressure on us.
Yes. Well, David, I think we have time for only one more. Can you, anonymous, ask this question? How will the Notre Dame de Namur campus present new opportunities for Stanford, both programmatically and architecturally? And could you explain the nature of that agreement and how large of a land mass we're talking about?
Yeah, so this is, we are exploring the opportunity. This is, I think it's a 4 to 5 year opportunity for us to see what is possible on that site. What's exciting about that site for me is that it's unlike Redwood City, which was pretty flat. This site has a lot of topography. It has a couple of potentially historic resources. So I think what we're going to do is explore what the possibilities are on this site. We don't have a particular program right now, but it's a great opportunity. It's in a great community. I think our architectural opportunity is that how do we capture some of the principles and the ethos of what I just talked about, but not stick a little Stanford up there. I think there's going to be opportunities to be even more cutting edge in our sustainability. I think there's opportunities to have an architecture that complements the community, but still is high quality. And that's, I think, going to be part of our charge over the next 4 years.
David, thank you so much. Your presentation was terrific. You handled every one of those questions diplomatically and correctly and directly. Thank you so very much. And now I'd like to turn it back to the president of our committee, Chairman Leslie Kim.
Thank you, Larry. President is probably not the right title, but yeah, that was really a fantastic presentation, David. Really, thank you so very much on behalf of the Historical Society for taking the time to give us that talk. And thank you, Larry, for moderating the Q&A. Thank you also to our audience for your excellent questions and for joining us today. Again, to our members, your continued support makes what we do possible, and we are incredibly grateful.